back to the Life's Better podcast, where we say life is so much better with God, community, and purpose. My name is Jonathan Gleason. I am joined by the handsome and wonderful Josh Doolin.
You think I'm handsome?
Well, you know what? Emily actually told me I need to introduce you that way. And I said no, actually.
Oh, okay.
But $5 goes a long way.
Bribery.
That's what it came down to.
Got it.
So several years ago, Josh, my family and I, we were on a road trip, and we happened to be in Montana. And if you've ever been to Montana, it's fairly beautiful. And so I was talking with a mechanic who was working on a trailer that we were pulling.
Okay.
And I made the comment that it's a really beautiful state, and he must really enjoy it. And he stopped what he was doing. He looked at me and he said, "Well, you're experiencing it in summer." And it had been summer. It was like the beginning of July. And then he looked at me and he said, "You should come back in winter. It's awful." and I kind of chuckled and laughed, and we went on later that day and experienced Glacier National Park, which is one of the best experiences on our road trip. And who knows, though? Maybe in winter it is miserable and awful. I don't know. But definitely according to him,
I've never had anybody in a state want to sell me on not coming back.
And he may have just been like tired of life and work. I don't know. But that was his reaction. And I think it's interesting because there's probably seasons for all of us, seasons of winter.
Yeah.
These are moments in life where maybe at one point you were really feeling passionate with your relationship with God, and it's cooled. Maybe you were excited about community, but now community is the biggest emotional drain in your life. You thought you had a clear purpose and significance for life, and now you're lost and feeling really afraid that maybe you've gone the wrong direction. And so what we're going to be dealing with on today's podcast is how can we move towards seasons of spring when all we're feeling is winter? But before we get into that content, Josh, you and I were going to play a game.
Yeah.
It's true or false. You've come up with some true or false questions having to do with winter.
Yep.
I have as well. And you guys can play along and see if you can figure out which ones are correct and which ones are made up.
Yeah.
I'm going to go first. Is that cool?
Yeah, that's fine with me.
10 million Americans suffer from seasonal affective disorder, or SAD, also known as winter blues. This is a reoccurring major depression which most often takes place in the fall or winter and leaves in the spring. True or false?
That is true, I believe.
You are correct.
Also, somebody had a lot of fun naming that acronym.
I know.
SAD. Like,
and I don't know if that's, SAD, because affective is not spelled with an A, so it's not a really accurate one, but it works. It works. Yeah. That is true, and I probably gave you way too much information, and that was probably your first clue.
Yeah.
He's giving me way too much details. It has to be true. Yeah. Who makes these things up?
Good, true, or false questions. I mean, good, tricky ones are the ones that have way too much detail, and you're like, oh, well, it has to be true.
Yeah, exactly. But, so maybe you thought I was clever and just giving too much information.
I did. For a second, I was like, maybe that acronym seems too silly to be real. But no, that's real.
I was hoping that might be the case.
All right,
you got 1 point.
All right, mine starts with a Winter Olympics question.
Okay.
So Russia has won more gold medals in the Winter Olympics than any other country. Is that true or false?
You know what? I would think it's one of those Scandinavian countries, not Russia. But that's a tricky one. I'm still going to go with false on this one.
False?
Yeah.
That is correct. False.
False is correct?
False is correct.
Woohoo!
I know that was a little confusing. It is not Russia. Do you have any guess what it might be? Which one? Sweden. That is a good guess. It is Norway.
So
you were right. You were right. It is one of those Scandinavian, close around there. Okay. And they're one of 3 countries who have won more medals in the Winter Olympics than Summer Olympics. Only 3 countries.
That makes sense. It's cold there.
Yeah. So they're really good at winter things. Yeah.
All right, next one for you. In a survey done by Think Finance, 45% of Americans say they would prefer to skip Christmas.
Really?
I don't know. I don't know. You tell me.
That has to be false. There's no way that many people want to skip Christmas.
Almost
Christmas
half?
Is so good.
That's too crazy, right? Unfortunately, according to their research,
true?
45% say they would rather skip Christmas.
Man.
Sad.
I need to invite them to my Christmas. My Christmas is so great. How in the world is it that bad?
I feel the same way. All right, you still only have 1 point. Man.
I know people who would rather all holidays be Christmas.
Yeah, if you ask most people what your favorite holiday is,
Yeah.
I would say the vast majority of people say Christmas.
Yeah.
You get some weirdos that might say Halloween, but let's be honest, that should not be anyone's favorite. I don't know.
All right. My second one says it is impossible for lightning to occur during snowfall. Thus, in a winter storm, you are always safe from lightning. Is that true or false?
Okay, so if it's snowing, it's impossible for lightning.
It's kind of like a temperature question. Do you think it's possible for lightning to occur during snowfall?
So lightning occurs when you get like the heat and the cool, and that's what's creating the electric charges. I'm gonna go ahead and say that's true. I mean, if it's so cold that it's producing snow, I'm sure there's some exception though.
I was gonna say it is false. It is false, actually. Sorry. It is a rare occurrence, but when a cold front and a warm front can sometimes hit at just the right time, it's a anomaly called thunder snow, and it happens often in lake areas. So like actually, I remember in Campbellsville there was actually a time when this happened. So yeah.
I wish I could have that one back. Okay.
I just thought Thunder Snow was a really cool name for something.
You can name your next dog that.
Thunder Snow. Yeah.
All right, last one for you. When I was in middle school, I ran away from home on Christmas Eve.
Oh man, this is just a toss in the air thing. You know, I feel like there's a story that you're gonna tell with it, so it has to be true.
Has to be true. It is true.
Okay.
I won't tell you the story. I'll just say that there was some run-in with one of my family members, and I was an emotional middle schooler, and I was like, "Well, that's how you feel." And I like jumped out of my window.
Was it like during the middle of like a meal type of thing, or
no? It was. I think we were actually opening up some presents, and there was just kind of this argument, and I went to my room, and I thought I overheard something. It was like, if that's how you feel about me, I'm leaving. And it was not the best Christmas. That's pretty much what that came down to.
You would rather have skipped Christmas that year.
For sure. Yes.
All right. My last one is, so it's 2-1, right? Like I have 2.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. So this could be
tie or die.
Tie or die. Yeah. The Earth is closest to the sun during winter.
Okay. For those in the northern hemisphere?
For us.
I'm going to go true on this one.
That is correct. Yeah, it is absolutely true. I thought that was a tricky one because you think, oh, well, it's colder, so we have to be further away from the sun. That is not true. Okay. It has everything to do, and I assume you know this because you mentioned the northern hemisphere thing. It has everything to do with the axis tilt. Yeah. The x-axis tilt. So actually, every single winter for us, starting in January, we are furthest from the sun, or closest to the sun, sorry. But because of our tilt away from the sun, we get colder weather.
Yeah. No, I didn't know that one, but that is good to know that I at least tied.
Yeah,
I feel like I usually lose these. I feel so. I'm gonna.
I always come up with way harder things. Like with our sayings one, I came up with like the most ridiculous.
I still learned a lot of fun things. Yeah. Even with this one, thunder snow.
Thunder snow.
Thunder snow. There we go. All right. Well, today we're not just gonna play true or false, and we're not just gonna hate on winter or anything like that. We are using winter as an analogy for those times in our life when you're just not feeling it.
Yeah.
Those moments where, again, your connection with God is just cooled, connection with other people, and how do we move past that? In fact, I want to ask you: have you experienced those seasons? And if you have, give us an example of something.
Yeah. So I mean, even the Bible, it compares our highs and lows to seasons. Like you're in a season of this or that, and no, I've definitely. Being a person who gets very excited about things, and when things are new, like I'm at my peak. Like I love learning new things, experiencing new challenges, and trying to overcome them. But when things can kind of get into that monotony, I experience that low. And so the one I wanted to share is actually a year into ministry here. And it was just because I'd never been in full-time ministry before. I had graduated with kind of this like fantastical idea of ministry. I'd even studied missions, wanting to do that with my life. And so a year into here, like when I took this job, I was like, okay, well, Lawrenceburg is going to be my mission field, and I'm gonna treat it as if I'm a missionary there and have that mental approach. But a year in, I had slowly started to lose that because things had started to, get hard, and also I hadn't taken care of myself the way that I know a lot of ministers do, because when you're pouring out, you need that pouring in, and I didn't know that, and I think that was probably one of the moments that has only occurred around that time, but I know that a lot of ministers, like they say, like that first year is crucial, and I almost didn't get over that hump because it was so difficult. Like I started to really feel it, and I doubt very many of you guys even maybe noticed it, but it was definitely something that I struggled with.
Yeah. No, thank you for sharing that. I think we've all experienced similar situations, and we'll talk a little bit later, maybe even how you kind of moved out of that.
Yeah.
In fact, that's where we're headed with this, discussion anyway. Not that long ago, I was listening to this TED Talk. A woman by the name of Allison Lagerwood was giving this TED Talk, and she's a social psychologist, and she was explaining how she began to notice some things about her day and about her life. She noticed that, if something good happened, she gave the example of maybe one of her papers got published. She would feel like the spike of excitement and joy and happiness. And it would last for maybe like 2-3 hours tops, and then she'd drop back into normal, kind of just feeling normal. And then maybe the next day, one of the papers that she wanted to get published got denied, and so she would kind of have the spike go in the opposite direction. She'd feel negative about life and her situation. But the kicker was she noticed that those negative emotions, they just stuck with her longer, where her feelings of joy lasted a few hours, her feelings of either despair or disappointment could last days. And so she started asking herself the question, and she began to ask her colleagues the question, I wonder if our brains kind of naturally have a tendency to get stuck in the negative. And you can listen to her TED Talk if you want, but it came down to the answer being yes, our brains do naturally kind of get stuck in the negative. And through their research and their study, they discovered that one of the reasons for this is because it requires more mental energy to actually move from a sad state or a disappointed state to a positive state. So it's just going to require more work to get out of it. And I don't know if we need a ton of research to understand this and relate to it.
Yeah.
Have you ever had one of those moments where life is great and you got 100 people speaking wonderful things into your life, but it just takes that one individual and it just ruins everything? Yeah. Or even when it comes to school or to work's going great, everything's firing on all cylinders, but one really stressful week, and you want to throw in the towel, I'm just going to collect unemployment and be done with this whole thing, right? It doesn't take much.
No. Yeah.
And one of the things that I really enjoyed listening when it came to this research was she really emphasized the fact that it requires effort, it requires work, mental energy to move out of those seasons of winter. And I think it's really important for us to kind of know that going in on the front end, that it is going to be challenging to move out of that winter season into seasons of spring. A couple of weeks ago, we were actually in a staff meeting, and we were talking about this story that I think really relates to what we're talking about today.
Yeah.
Do you mind sharing the story?
Yeah, absolutely. So it starts with this new married couple, right? And they spend each morning together eating breakfast. And the wife looks out her window, and every day she notices the neighbors across the street, this lady putting up her laundry on the line. And she notices that this laundry is really dirty and nasty, and obviously when you hang it up, that's when it should be clean. It should be at its most clean. And she keeps making these negative comments about well, this lady clearly needs better detergent. She needs to be taught how to do laundry better, all these different things. And every single day, they would go through this routine where they would eat breakfast together, and this wife would just complain about this lady's laundry next door. And then one morning, they wake up and she notices that across the street, all of the laundry is clean, and she mentions, "Oh wow, this is great!" Like she clearly. Somebody has told her like the problems that she has and needs to fix, and she's overcome it. And the husband stops her real fast. No. What I need to tell you is this morning I actually woke up earlier than you and cleaned the windows. And so every day she'd been looking through these dirty windows and seeing what she thought was dirty laundry, but it was actually clean.
Yeah, it was actually her personal window.
Yeah.
That was the problem. And I love that punchline because not only is it a little funny, but it's also convicting.
Yeah.
Convicting in the sense that, I mean, have you ever looked at people, situations, circumstances, and immediately kind of took a negative outlook and really, if we're honest, or maybe even afterwards, maybe a few months or years go by and you look back at that same situation and you realize, you know what, actually, I think the problem might have been me and my heart and my perspective, not those others. And I know for me, I can definitely do that at times in my life. And it's important for us to recognize this. It actually reminds me of the Grand Canyon, which sounds a little strange. I've been to the Grand Canyon a few times in my life. The last time I visited, I was in their visitor center, and they had this display that was telling us about the first time a white European American had actually visited the Grand Canyon. This was back in 1857, and the federal government realized that the Grand Canyon and its surrounding area, it was like the least explored area of the western United States. So they said, hey, we got to send a team out there. And so they sent an individual with the Army Corps of Engineer. His name was Joseph Ives. And he said, hey, check out the Colorado River, see if it's navigable, see if there's any resources there at the Grand Canyon. And so they spent weeks and weeks checking this thing out and really surveying everything. First European American to see the Grand Canyon. And this was his perspective on the Grand Canyon. This is what he writes after he's finished.
Oh, no.
He says, the region is, of course, altogether valueless. It can be approached only from the south, and after entering it, there is nothing to do but leave. Ours has been the first and will doubtless be the last party of whites to visit this profitless location. It seems intended by nature that the Colorado River, along the great portion of its lonely and majestic way, shall be forever unvisited and undisturbed.
Wow.
How is that possible? Like, how is it possible that Lieutenant Ives could not see what millions and millions have grown to appreciate? I mean, honestly, the Grand Canyon is considered one of the 7 natural wonders of the world.
Yeah.
It's visited by millions of people every single year. How did he miss it?
Yeah.
I think it comes down to this, this idea of cleaning that window that you're looking at. And it gives Ives just a little bit of a break. I think he probably had some hope that the Colorado River would have been more navigable than it was. To his credit, I mean, he didn't get to drive there on a highway. He was on horseback, and it was dirty and dusty, and I'm sure at times extremely miserable.
Yeah.
And there was family that he was probably missing. And so there's all these things, but all those things that really just kind of cloud up how the rest of us see the world. He needed to use a little maybe Windex for his own soul.
Yeah, I think on top of that too, like just to speak to winter and like getting out of that, he went in with a purpose in mind, looking for this specific thing to happen. And when it didn't, he immediately was negative about everything. And I think that is a huge part of why we even enter into winters in the first place, because we want to see something happen. We have an idea of how this situation is going to turn out. And when it's different, not necessarily bad, but different, we immediately think of it as negative. Yeah.
Yeah. No, I think that is a perfect example. And we're going to give you some tips now to hopefully help move any of you who are feeling like you're in a winter season out of that. And we'll bring up what Josh said in just a moment to hopefully help you with this. The first key, I think, to moving out of winter seasons is to understand that we actually have the power to choose how we feel, how we interact and see and relate to those around us. Josh, you and I were reading, along with some of the other folks in the church, The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. And Stephen Covey talks about how there's this wonderful gift, there's this wonderful power that we have in between the stimulus and the response.
Yeah.
Stimulus being the things that are happening to us, the things that have happened to us, and the response that we give to those things. And what is it that we have right in the middle of those two things?
We have a choice.
We have choice. All of us can choose how we're going to react. And with Ives, he had the power to choose, hey, I'm going to still see the beauty in the Grand Canyon, or I'm just going to see the misery of the disappointment that I have towards the Grand Canyon. And that was his choice. He had that choice.
Yeah.
And just to be fair, again, I think it's probably, again, going back to even the TED Talk that I brought up, it's just easier sometimes to go negative. It's easier for us to throw our hands in the air and play the victim and say, well, hey, the world's out to get me. It's just so hard and so frustrating. And it's just easier just to flop. It's just easier to do that.
You don't have to do anything.
You're hopefully someone will rescue you who has more energy, who has the ability. Well, like, hey, you know what? Let me help you out. But you're giving that choice up to them, and that's a destabilizer, not something that actually empowers. And so we would encourage you to just continue to recognize that you have the strength and the power to choose in any given situation. The second tip that we would give is make sure that you're living out gratitude on a regular basis. Gratitude, there's so much research being done on the positive effects of gratitude. And in fact, I want to just read to you one of the things that Robert A. Emmons, he's a professor of psychology at the University of Davis, says about gratitude. He says, gratitude can lower blood pressure, improve immune function, and facilitate more effective sleep. Gratitude reduces lifetime risk for depression, anxiety, and substance abuse disorders, and is a key resiliency factor in the prevention of suicide. Mm-hmm. Who would have known? Just by being grateful, you can not only be doing things that are really helpful for you emotionally, but also even spiritually and physically. I'm curious how you practice gratitude on a regular basis. What are some of the things that you kind of move into the regular rhythms of your life?
Yeah, so this was something that was modeled to me from my dad from a very early age. Just a person who's very content with where he is. And every single day, I remember we would pray about the things that we should be praying blessings for. Mm-hmm. Even if we were praying for somebody, for something, we would always start the prayer with something we're thankful for. Mm-hmm. And so that was always just something that's been a huge help to me, and specifically in my prayers. But I would say the biggest help, and if you're not, and this is something we've talked about in the past in a different podcast, but if you're not a person who spends quality time with God, you can try to throw in practices of, hey, let's think of 5 good things for 1 bad thing. You can do all those things, but if you're not having that time where you slow down and you really take what is going on and give it to God, you're not gonna. For me specifically, I never have a comfortable day if I haven't spent at least 15 to 20 minutes just talking and giving the day to God. And I don't know if that is something that you do too, or...
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm curious, even when it came to the story that you told at the beginning of the podcast, what was it that allowed you to kind of move out of that winter season?
So I actually talked to Brandon about it, just kind of expressed... I didn't express all of it. I kind of just said, like, hey, what do you do, like, when you feel this way? Because, he has been in ministry a lot longer, and I know people have to feel that way at some point. How do you get over that slump? Because you have an enemy, and especially ministers are so targeted because Satan wants you to end that ministry. And so I know I felt that way, and he started speaking a lot of truth about what he does to kind of be filled in order to pour out. Sure. And he encouraged me to listen to a few different ministers' podcasts, and maybe even talk to some people that I know well enough, but just because of schedule, the podcast thing was a lot easier. Yeah. And since then, I've actually weekly listened to Church of the City podcast with John Tyson and a few other pastors that preach there. And whether it's going and play, I started that because I wasn't a podcast listener yet, by going and playing disc golf and always just having that in my ear. Now lately it's been, if I'm grocery shopping, I have that going on in my ear, and obviously people will talk to you every once in a while, so it's just like a simple pause. But no, going and having that time and listening and getting poured into kind of resets my perspective on things. And the moment that I feel filled up, or the moment that I feel poured into, it becomes 1,000 times easier to pour into others. Yeah. That to me, learning that I needed to be poured into in order to pour out was a huge lesson for me a year in. And I obviously have a couple of other things. I typically am a person that is very content with what I'm given. I have a lot of blessings to count. If I have, and I've met people who have a lot less. And so having that perspective too, of just remembering, what could you have, and what could you not have that you have currently, and being even okay with losing things, because Paul was, or like people that that speak that truth of, you need to learn to be okay with much or okay with little, and just knowing that at any time all of this could go away, and you should just be thankful for it.
Yeah, no, I like the fact that you see even the things, the gifts that have been given to you that are no longer in your life, you still see that as a gift that you did have, and you are appreciative of it. You are grateful that God brought it into your life for a season, even though it may not be for the rest of your life. Yeah.
In all honesty, too, I was told this a while ago by some. I have a friend who is a missionary kid, and they were really attached to this family. They're from Indonesia, who lost a kid, and she quoted that God gives, God takes away, and I'm still going to praise God type of thing. And ever since then, I've just realized, they said something along the lines of, we needed our kid for that time.
Sure.
But God counted us worthy enough and good enough in our faith to get by without. And I was just like, wow, like I don't know, the blessings that I have now are awesome, and I need them, and God's given me them to get through what I'm going through now. But if you were to take them away, you need to have that perspective of, God sees your faith has grown, and he knows that you can still get through this without that blessing anymore.
Yeah, and the nice thing too is there's always more blessings.
Yeah,
God continue to give new ones. Is it the same one? No, but can it be just as rich and just as beautiful? Absolutely. But it requires us to have eyes to see it, which again goes back to the story of, hey, sometimes we just need to clean off that window that we're viewing our world through.
Absolutely.
There's a third little tip that we want to give you. First, again, recognize that you have this wonderful ability to choose. Second, live out gratitude on a regular basis. Spend that time with God, sharing that gratitude with him. And that's really where we're moving on with this third one. My wife talks about, living out gratitude as finding the good. And so this third aspect is sharing the good. Share the good with others. I don't know if you've ever done this. Maybe not, but most people seem to have. Oftentimes we just kind of launch into more negative talk than positive talk. Let's say you go home from work today and Emily asks, hey Josh, how was work? And you might go, oh, John was such a punk today.
Every day I go.
Yeah, that's the normal conversation. You need to get out of that pattern and start sharing and looking for the good, right? And that's the thing. Sometimes we just naturally go negative. Oh, the weather's really cold. Oh, the weather's really hot. And we just kind of go negative. But the critical aspect is, if you're looking for the good and you are practicing gratitude, you need to share it too. Not only will that build you up, but it'll build up those around you, and it begins to change your environment. An example that I have in my own life with the boys, I sit down with them every single day, and one of the things that we do, besides just reading the Bible and prayer, is we actually practice gratitude. And this has taken a few different forms over the years, but recently they've memorized the fruits of the Spirit: love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, goodness, faithfulness, gentleness, self-control. That's for those of you who may not know what they are. And we've asked them, okay, I want you to look back at the previous day and try to see how you've seen someone else living out those fruits. And so this morning, one of my sons was reflecting and shared how he saw his mom living out patience, and he explained, the dog was kind of not behaving well, and they were being a little wilder, and she just consistently lived out patience. And he was saying how grateful he was that she was living out patience for them, because he learned something. He learned that even in the midst of frustration, he doesn't have to respond that way. And her example really encouraged him. So not only did that kind of create some gratitude in him, but how do you think that made mom feel? Of course, the whole environment began to change because she realized, hey, they're noticing this, and we can all grow.
Yeah.
Well, we hope you guys enjoyed this podcast. Remember, you guys have the power to make those choices. Doesn't matter what the stimulus is, you can respond however God has designed you to respond. And you can live out gratitude every single day, and we encourage you to share it.